Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Type 35 build. Progress waits for no one, and the work I've gotten accomplished here, it may be a small step for man, but it's one giant leap for this car. We'll start with the driver's side and the exhaust manifold, or header in this case, a 1 5/8 primary and 2.5-inch collector stainless steel header to be exact, and a really nice piece at that. Clean bends, pretty welds. Only thing is, it looks nothing like an MX-5 exhaust header. And that's because it's not a header for an MX-5. One of the greatest terms in our automotive lexicon is platform sharing. Ugh, isn't that pretty? So, a Miata header was never going to fit. They swooped back way too far and would have crashed right into my pedal box. So I needed a more compact header that was closer to a center dump than a rear dump. Like here, where the collector lands considerably forward of the transmission bell housing and gives me plenty of room for the ball flange connection and downpipe. Room on the motor mount side of the collector, not so spacious. It's too tight to run a header mounted O2 sensor, but there's still enough of a gap for an O2 sensor plug to fit in the header without hitting the motor mount. Finding the header was kind of fun. Thanks to the whole platform sharing thing, I looked for cars that used the same exhaust manifold gasket as the MX-5, and one of them was a 1991 Ford Escort GT. With a little more hunting, I found a stainless steel header for the Escort and ta-da! A gorgeous header that nicks right into place. But what about parts that you have to fabricate yourself? It's still a little raw, but tell me that isn't a shocking change from the factory dual runner intake manifold. I really liked the look of the old Solex and SU side draft carburetors, but wanted something with some modern drivability. And I found Holley makes a fuel injection replacement for the Autolite 1100 carburetor. And I thought, if you lay that down, it'd look just like a side draft carburetor. So I fabricated an intake to make it look like a side draft carb. I used the gasket that came with the fuel injection kit as a template to whittle a pad for the throttle body to sit onto. And on the rear of the intake, which you can't see with the intake on, I had to round off a tab on the block so the manifold would fully seat onto the gasket. Ugh, tell me that's not pretty. Up behind the intake are the factory fuel injector ports in the head, which those are going to get closed off here real soon. It's kind of cool looking down at the manifold from above. It really gives you a sense of how clean and simple the whole assembly is. A little less simple is the throttle lever, which you kind of want out where you can get to it, but for me, it's hidden behind the idle air control motor. So a bit of linkage will be needed to reach it, but the intake manifold allows for a lot of room for creativity in getting the linkage back to the firewall. Speaking of creative, the throttle body pad had to be welded on counter to the angle of the cylinder head mating surface, so when it was all bolted together, the throttle body'd actually sit level. What else? On the lower right of the manifold, there's a rib on the alternator bracket that had to be shaved down because it was hitting the intake. And just peeking out from the bottom right is the vacuum port fitting. Oh, and port alignment. Too bad you can't see that. I used the original manifold gasket as a template for milling the port locations, and they came out spot on. I spent a lot of time thinking about the shape of the intake though, because the top manifold bolts are partially in line with the intake ports, and to fit the throttle body pad under the center bolt puts it about halfway down below the port openings, and it was leading to complicated and fussy manifold shapes. Then it occurred to me, why not build a box intake? Through bolt the assembly to the cylinder head and Bob's your uncle. I might switch to stainless fasteners, probably buff the manifold down to a dull polish. This may be my fourth favorite part, but it's hard to not keep coming up with new favorite parts as the car progresses. Isn't it?